What have I said? You can have something like this on screen without having to use image masks, complicated code, uploading SVGs, or finding yourself going back and forth when you have to modify it for different responsive sizes. This was all done with one bit of code, and it is so versatile in how you can apply it. And I feel like this is the most innovative way that you are going to be able to invert the borders of your containers or your images to have some funky styles. Let me explain the pain points first. You may have an image or you may have a background image and you may want to apply some funky styling like what I just showed you there, where you might want to, interconnect words, images or other widgets, but you want to have your image like flow in a bit of a curved outline. And it's what's known as inverted rounded corners. And if you go online, you're going to see people that do loads of codes, or it's very complicated, but they're never perfect. And often it's quite difficult to follow along. Or what's worse is some people will do something whereby, if you take this example down here, they may have like a container, then you add another container, then you add a pseudo class, then you add a spacer, then you add another image, and you're rounding to the nth degree. And then when you get to the mobile, what might look good on the desktop does not look so good on the mobile anymore. And you can waste so much time on something quite insignificant, especially if it was just in the hero banner or on one page. How much time do you want to put into it? What I'm going to show you, you can implement and apply within minutes, okay? And when I say minutes, you could probably do it in seconds because I'll give you all the code in the video description. By the way, this is all pure CSS. There's no JavaScripting or anything like that happening here. Back to the pain point, because I did mention that you could use SVGs as well. This over here has an SVG image mask applied, and that's okay. But what if your client then says, actually, we want to round this corner less or more? Well, then you got to go and get another SVG. Or maybe you stick like a rounded circle or a bit of text in here, and now you realize actually that's not the right pattern we want to go for. Now, there are limitations to what I'm going to show you. It's not going to be perfect for everyone, but I think it's going to help a ton of you out there, because when I see posts on Facebook and other areas, this is going to satisfy 99% of the market, and I totally believe that. So image masks could be a problem. Now, let's say you wanted to apply this and you go, well, why don't I just have 4 child containers inside of a container and I go and give them a white background like what I've done over here. So we've got a parent container with 4 child, and you can see this container here and this container child. I've gone and given them like a white background, and that's perfect. We get that pattern over here, which is what I want to achieve here. But then the problem comes with, what do you do with container 2 and 3? Because if I apply a background color, well, then you lose the image. What about if you try and make the image be shown? Well, how do you invert it to make these go white? It becomes very tricky. And anyone that goes, well, why don't you just add 4 images and use cover and then set the center left, center right, top position and all of that? It does not work for you, okay? You're just going to get the same 4 images. Unless you're going to go and get your image and slice it up perfectly. But then again, when you get to responsive mode, that might not be what you want. This is going to be responsive for you. So let's just cut to the chase. Okay, how did we get this to work? Let's go and look at the structure. We're going to start with a parent container. Nothing flashy going on here. It's just a parent container. Inside we have a child container. This is where you would go and set your image. Now, you don't have to have an image. You could, if you want, just apply a color, any color you want. We're going to leave it as an image, and you would set it as contain, cover, how you want it to look. All right, you can position it to be what you want. The important bit is the width and the height, because I'm going to use this to kind of determine what I'm going to do with the sub-child, okay? So my parent container, you can be quite flexible with that. The child container, 400 by 400. I've also set it to be a row and wrap because of my sub-child and how I want to place them. I've zeroed out the margin and padding, and there is no ID or class name for the parent or the child, okay? So this is where you set your background image, your overlays, anything like that, and where you pop the CSS code in, which we're going to come on to. Now, the sub-child containers, all of them, and I've got 4 of them, are 200 by 200. Because if my child container has a 0 column and row gap, which is what it had, everything will sit perfectly within the space, okay? Every single sub-child does have a class name. So I've got C1, C2, C3, and C4. All right, I kept it pretty simple here. So if you were going to have 6 child containers, You would have C5 and C6. That's the class name, all right? You don't have to give it an ID. And as far as the subchilds go, this subchild over here just contains a heading. There is no background color added in here. There is no border radius applied either. Let me go to the container and show you. In the style, there's no color. You go to the border, it is zeroed out. There's nothing going on there. Let's go to the heading. There is no, let's just show you. There is no background color and there is no border, right? There's no trickery going on here because everything will be done within the code. If we go to subchild number 2, there's nothing in there. Subchild number 3, there's nothing in there. And in subchild number 4, all I have again is a heading. There's no background color going on here. Well, sorry, there is a background color to the heading because I made it be a circle. But I haven't added any background or border radius to the subchild container, okay? Because everything will be done within the code. So let's go to the code, and the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of it so you see how this looks without the code. This is how it looks. Not so cool. Now I'm going to paste in the code. Focus on that image. Just keep looking at the image as I paste in and watch it take shape. All right. Wasn't that quite nice? I don't know. I like that. Let's now focus on the code. And don't be scared, it's not that complicated at all. C1, the first subchild, I've gone and given it a background color of white. So if I go and change that to be black, you're going to basically see what it does there. So if you wanted to apply a different color to match your background, please do so. Now, I will give you one limitation. If you've gone and added like gradients and patterns to your background, it's not going to pick this up. This is where you may want to go for the SVG mask or something like that. But the reason why I'm trying to steer you away from that is because you might have a layout that looks great on the desktop. But when you go to the mobile, you might still want it, or you might want a different layout, or maybe your text is bigger or whatever's going on. You could use @media to tinker with this code. So on the desktop, this is what's applied. When you get to the tablet, you might have something different. On the mobile, you might have something different. The important bit is the border radius. So if I go and get rid of that, we now have a full-on square. By me popping in, say, 200, we have a much bigger radius there. But you can see now it's crept out over there and there. And that's because of what we did in container 2 and 3 in terms of C2, C3, the subchild. Let me pop that back to be 100. Then with C4, I just did the same thing. And this time I just applied it to the top margin, which you can see there. If I wanted to apply it in other areas, so I go and do something like that, I could do. But that wasn't the look I was going for. This bit over here is pretty important in terms of backface visibility because different browsers handle what I'm doing slightly differently. What this does is basically get rid of what's known as a bit of a faint line that could appear because you don't want to have like a really thin 1 pixel line there where they're all hitting each other. You don't want that. This gets rid of that. So if you had C5 and C6, make sure you go and add them into this code as well. And don't just use the terminology I've used, right? You're probably going to have better names. But then again, C1, C2, C3 does work quite well. This bit of code restricts the content to stay within the boundaries. Again, if you were going to have more classes in there, go and add them in. Don't change these values, by the way, okay? Leave them as they are. The only things you're going to change are the border radius and the color if you're going to apply any. Now let's get on to C2, right? This is a bit of a lengthier code, but you do not need to touch anything except this bit over here, the border radius. You leave the background color as transparent, okay? And it will pick up whatever is the color of the child container. You don't touch the box shadow. You don't touch any of that. The only time when you touch the box shadow is if you feel like you need to broaden out the shadow. And that's how I got this to work. I spent 3 days back and forth trying to think of how could we do this without using an image mask or an SVG. And I was looking at what people were doing online and I felt they were too complicated. No one had thought of, well, if someone has, I apologize, point them out to me. I really do apologize if someone has, but no one was using the box shadow effect and doing what I'm doing with a negative offset to get your inverted curves. This took a bit of trial and error to get right. Anyway, I've got 50 at the top, 50 on the right, 50 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. If I was to go and change this to be 100, you can now see what it's done over there to the image, which isn't actually that bad of an effect, is it? But we'll leave it as 0. I'm going to go to the box shadow, and I'm going to get rid of that 50. Watch what happens. Can you see that? By me doing what I've done with the shadow, it basically creates this shadow effect. So what it's doing is, I can't explain it properly because I have to go into quantum mechanical physics and stuff. But this basically does the invert for you. If you were to go for a lower value though, you would get that effect. Can you see what we're doing there? We're getting the line, but it's kind of, it's intersecting, but then we still get the pattern outside as well. And I just found 50 worked well. However, if you were to go for an outline like 200, this value here now won't be enough. And I find that you have to always go for half of what it is. So where I'm using 50, I could have got away with 25, but I just set it as 50 as a default. If you go and make your border be 200, make sure you set that value to be 100. You don't touch the other 000, you leave that, but you go and set that. And then when it came to C3, I just basically changed it to be 50, 0, 50, and 50. You can see the values there. So, you know, again, like I said, if I was to go and put 500, I mean, look, can you see how I'm getting complete bespoke designs on here? So maybe you do want to do something a bit funky and have all the images bleed through behind it. You could do that. And here's another container where I've now applied different CSS. So I'm just going to show you it's exactly the same build, same size, 400 by 400. We've got a parent, we got a child, we got 4 sub-child. If I go to the CSS code, and I'm not going to go through it bespoke, you know, in every bit of detail. These are now C12, C22, C32, C42. You can see how lazy I was when creating this. But now I've made sure that C4 or 42 now has a pattern style applied as well with a border radii. I'm going to stick that code in the video description as well. Hopefully I'll be able to do that. If not, I'll stick a link in. But you've got that code as well. And then over here, it's the same code. And this time I went and added in background images into each of the containers. So for the child container, I left it black. And into each sub-child, I went and added in individual images. So you could do that. And then down here, I've done exactly the same thing. But this time, I'm actually using a grid rather than Flexbox, where I had 400 by 400. And then I had row and wrap. This now is 2 columns and 2 rows. It's the same thing. Look, I've got the same 4 sub-child, and I just stuck the code into the grid with the child container, which was the grid. So if you want to use Flexbox, you can. If you want to use child or grid, you can do. If you want to do at media and have different responsive views, you can do. There is no image mask being used here at all. And if I show you this design, this is a 600 width by 400 height. Again, I have row and wrap. I've now got 6 subchilds, 1, 2, 3. You can see there's a curve there, 4. There's a bit of a curve there, 5 and 6. And we got a button. So you can just see how this looks if I do that. I mean, look, if someone showed you that right now, how do I do that? How would you respond? And a lot of you are going to say, yep, image mask or this or that or whatever. You're getting this nice inverted, curved, bordery effect kind of like that. And yeah, you could argue, but you're using multiple child containers and all of that. So that's like lots of pseudo classes. I don't think so. Because you're using containers, you're able to stick stuff into there. And controlling it is so simple. I've seen so many tutorials where people have got like a container, then they get a space and they position it with absolute or whatever. And then they get another bit and then they dissect it and then they position that. And I'm sat there going, you're forever positioning. Then when you get to a mobile or a tablet, you're having to adjust it and you're forever doing all of this. Make it simple for yourself. And if you look at the CSS for this one over here, there's more going on in the CSS because obviously I have C5.3 and C6.3. Again, my wonderful coding for my classes. I hope you like my approach with how I went about doing this because I know that this is not... Did you notice there was a bit of a flash just when we went? You won't get that on live, okay? That's just because we went from edit to looking at it like that. But that's what the code handles out for you. But I don't know about you, but applying simple stuff like this, where you're not now having to use an image mask. Look, I think the coding is simple. I really, really do. I can't make it any simpler because you will now just stick in your radii. You want to make it big, you want to make it small, you want to make it match, you want to, whatever you want to do. I hope you smash the like button for this because this is something that I've really wanted to crack for about 3 years. On and off, I always looked at solutions and tried it out and whatever, and I just could not get it there. And then I just suddenly thought out the box. with why don't we just use the border, but somehow I've got to stop it bleeding and whatever, right? Hey, I'm Imran from Web Squadron. I hope you like, subscribe, share, and follow. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain.